Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. And joining me is Timothy J. Cox, actor, filmmaker. Really appreciate your time coming on here today.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I've gotten a chance to communicate with you and check out a lot of your work recently. And I figured before we jump into my standard questions for the show, if you wanted to highlight some of your projects that might be in festivals right now that are out and about that you really want to throw out there.
Sure. The big ones right now are After Hard Truths and Sundays with Dad. They were all produced by a wonderful company in Columbus, Ohio, Awesome Films, which was founded by Thomas Angeletti, who has directed After and Hard
Mhm.
Truths, and my basically my producing partner for the last 2 years. And Maya Ahmed was the director of Hard Truths and the director of the latest film that we just worked on just 2 weeks ago called Good Luck to Me, which is about it's a movie that I co-wrote with a wonderful writer and actress named Heather Bales, and it's about a married couple, and they've been together for 20 years, and they've reached that point in their relationship where they've kind of hit that wall of like, where is the marriage going? Do they keep going, or do they go their separate ways? And it's a really, really wonderfully sweet exploration of how you hold not only a marriage together, but a relationship. You know, for anyone who's ever had to make a really difficult decision, like if you've ever had to, in a position where you've had to fire a friend of yours, or really dig deep. And we had a ball making the film, and that should be coming out hopefully in the next couple of months.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you highlighting some of the films. And I've gotten a chance to watch quite a few of them recently. And obviously, like you could check out my letterbox reviews or you could check out my reviews here on the channel. But I really appreciate your work and I can tell how much you put into it. Definitely some of them you could tell you're having a lot of fun
Oh yeah.
with some of the characters that you get to play, and also being able to connect in such a human kind of way, especially like that last film you talked about. It's like, yeah, it's like about just over a year ago, I had to lay off one of my best friends at work of 7 years. And, you know, being in long-term relationships and those kinds of things, it's like we all have those kinds of connections. And
Hmm.
there's definitely been a few of the films, like I really appreciated Sunday with Dad. Because it's like it's so funny because I usually see my dad every couple of months and it's always on a Sunday afternoon and just going like sitting on his front porch and that's basically how our experiences go. And you like go in, it's like after not seeing somebody, it's like you have these things that come up. And definitely being able a chance to check out your work has been a pleasure over the past couple months. And I still have some to go. So you all should keep an eye out and see some of the other reviews that I have for some of Tim's work. But I guess, Tim, in terms of where can people find some of your films to go check out?
Many of them are on, like right now, Sundays with Dad, After and Hard Truths. They are on a brand new website specifically for short films
Okay.
called Shortly, shortlyfilm.com. They're new, and they're very supportive of short films, which I deeply appreciate. Many of the films are also on another site called Reveal. And many of these sites are, if you open a free account, they're free to watch, which is nice. And but many of them are also available on YouTube, and you'll find them hopefully also in numerous festivals. But they're very easily accessible, and also information on each film is on IMDb, and we're all on Letterboxd as well.
Awesome. I'll definitely have to check out those websites for sure because that definitely interests me. I do enjoy a good short film,
Mhm.
being able to check them out. But I guess, Tim, let's learn a little bit more about you. So let's get started with everybody's favorite question. What's your favorite film?
Man, that's a tough one.
I
I
know.
I would have to say, if there's one, if I was on an island and I
Mhm.
had what, actually, I don't know if I'm breaking a rule here, because it's The Godfather, but can I have Godfather 1 and 2? No offense to Godfather 3. I mean, we could have a lot of discussions about Godfather
Yeah,
3, but for me, Godfather 1 and Part 2 to me are one movie. And that to me is cinematic perfection. I mean, even Spielberg at
yeah,
Francis Ford Coppola's
mhm,
AFI ceremony, of all of the films that he's made, was
yeah,
say that The Godfather is the greatest American movie, and that's that's an no matter how many times I've seen it, and I've probably seen it about 50 times. Um, I still remember the first time I ever saw it. I'm old enough to remember before VHS and before Laserdisc, they used to have the old RCA video disc where you would
mm,
put the disc in, hit the little lever. And I had an Uncle Mike when my parents would go away for the weekend. My Uncle Mike would come down and visit us. And I was maybe 10 years old, and he would always come and watch The Godfather.
mm,
Now, I didn't see The Godfather when I was 10, but I heard the music for the first time. So he's watching The Godfather. I'm sitting on the steps. I'm supposed to be in bed. And I hear that opening score and I'm hearing the movie. So the first time, not technically I saw the movie, but I heard the movie was when I was 10 years old. And I was so fascinated. And I thought, who is this guy that's talking like this? And,
mhm,
it's my bad Brando, but,
mm,
and then when I finally saw it, it was just as, it's exceptional. I mean, from
yeah,
the production design, the writing, the acting, the music, and I don't know if you've seen The Offer, which is about the
yes,
making of The
hmm,
Godfather. If for anyone who wants to learn what Albert Ruddy and Francis Ford Coppola went through with the making of that movie, that makes you appreciate The Godfather even more. So
yeah,
definitely The Godfather 1 and Part 2, because it's very rare that a sequel is almost as good. Some would even say it's even better than the
mm.
original, but I got to go with the original. But both of them, to me, are one movie.
Well, I can relate because I always tell people Lord of the Rings are my favorite film, and it's just like it is just one long movie. They just had to cut it up into pieces at
Yeah.
some point,
Oh, yeah.
and they literally shot it all together, so it really is just one film. But that's the thing about The Godfather, and that really did change trends of like, hey, it's like you didn't just get random sequels to like dramas and gangster films like in that kind of way. And it's funny because I did actually watch The Godfather for the first time when I was 10 years old. Because I'm an Italian American from New Jersey and my grandfather's like, this is your culture. So I watched it, which I actually really liked the first one when I was a 10-year-old. Not so much the second one. It was probably the subtitles. And that's a big ask for a 10-year-old to sit through a 3 hour,
Sure.
20-minute movie with just half in Italian and not knowing Italian. And but those films are just absolutely incredible. And yeah, The Offer was such a fascinating experience, and like the whole mafia of it all,
And
just
all
looting
of,
over it.
well, and you think back to all of the stuff like they didn't want Pacino, they didn't want
Yeah,
Brando, they were going to fire Coppola. Um, Robert Evans originally they wanted to have Ryan O'Neal play
yeah,
Michael and make him a Northern Italian because Paramount, was really struggling. And Ryan O'Neal was the star of Love Story, and they
yeah.
wanted him to play Michael and Ali McGraw. Not only he was his wife at the time, but like they wanted that love story
Mm.
reunion. And Coppola stuck to his guns, and thank God for it. Thank God.
Well, yeah, and it's being as an Italian American from New Jersey, like being able to see like this was a film made by an Italian American for Italian Americans about Italian Americans,
Yeah.
and having Pacino in there because like obviously not the whole cast is Italian. Like Brando wasn't Italian, James Caan certainly was not Italian.
James
Um,
Caan was like he was voted Italian American two times, and he was a Jewish boy from the Bronx.
yeah,
I mean, he always got a kick out of that.
got that fire though.
Oh yeah.
Sonny. But it's just such an incredible film. And the second one is I'm also partial to the first one, but I wouldn't argue with people if they said The Godfather Part Two was the greater of the two. Now, oh, go ahead.
And now I was gonna say, and part three, I think the thing about part three, I mean, we could talk for hours about three. I don't
Yeah.
think three is a bad film. I think I missed Robert Duvall, the
Yes.
presence of Robert Duvall. Um, One, it had been 15 years since the last one, and I think there was a part of me that last image of Michael in the second film of him sitting there
Yeah.
alone, and after he closed the door on Diane Keaton, that's like a Shakespearean ending, like that he
Mhm.
like what has he wrought? Like he's
Yeah.
lost everything. He's lost his family. And I think people had with the redemption of Michael Corleone. Also at that same time, Goodfellas came out that same year. And a different
Yes.
attack, a very different attack on the same world, but it's like Goodfellas is a better film, I think, than
Mhm.
Godfather 3. But
Well,
yeah, it's
it's
they beat up on poor Sofia Coppola, but I don't think she
it
really deserved it.
wasn't her fault that her dad cast her in this movie.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
and that's the thing because the Godfather and Godfather Part 2 works so well as a two-act play.
hmm
Like hand in hand. And then it just kind of feels like, well, we made a third one.
hmm
And it is a fine film, and like I still enjoy it, but like
I
a lot like that was nominated for Best Picture, which is wild to think about 30 years ago that 35 years ago that was nominated for Best Picture. But yeah, Goodfellas. I think in context, that just makes it feel even more like this is what Italian Americans are making gangster movies today. And
yeah.
Scorsese felt fresh
Mhm.
and electric. And The Godfather Part 3 felt like this was 15 years too late kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And I guess my next question is thinking about I know you mentioned hearing The Godfather first time, but what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
I have a very clear memory. I think I was like 3 or 4 of being at a drive-in movie theater with my parents and my father and I were up in the front, and my youngest brother and my mom were asleep in the back, and we were watching Superman 2 at a drive-in.
Nice.
And I just remember being absolutely terrified of Terrence Stamp
Hmm.
as General Zod. But I remember being fascinated by him and learning that like sometimes the bad guys are the best parts.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just have a very clear memory of that. And even before I became an actor, I was always I fell in love with the movies,
Yeah.
and that one's a really clear memory.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I watched the actual original Superman 2, but I own the Richard Donner cut
hmm
version of it, and Terrence Stamp was such a fantastic villain as General Zod, and who doesn't who doesn't remember Kneel Before Zod?
Oh my
And
God, and Richard Donner,
yeah.
I mean like he was compelling, but like
Mhm.
it again, he there were real genuine stakes to
Mhm.
what he did, like that it was very much like years later, like there was an analysis of comparison between General Zod and the Edmund character in William Shakespeare's King Lear. And it was like, yeah, you could make that comparison. Like, and Terrence Stamp was a distinguished enough,
Yeah,
smart enough actor that he may have made that link as well.
easy.
But it's interesting that he brought so much weight to it too. He didn't overplay it. Like he didn't there was not cartoony. Like he
Mhm.
played it like he was playing Edmund in King Lear or playing Hamlet or playing, and like you appreciate that.
Well, yeah, and it's an interesting contrast because like Gene Hackman had so much fun in the first one, hamming it up as Lex Luthor, and
Mhm.
then you just have Terrence Stamp, who's much more reserved and menacing and looming, and also like an equal in strength to Superman. It made such an interesting dynamic between the
Yeah.
two. Now, Tim, do you have a particular favorite genre of movies?
I like, anytime where Billy Wilder has a great quote. He says, anytime that you can combine the comedy and the drama of everyday life, that's the best. So,
Mhm.
um, you take something like a Sideways or
Yep.
anything that Alexander Payne does or Billy Wilder or Mike Nichols. I like to laugh, but also like you like to like a punch in the gut too, and
Yeah.
like there are some like The Holdovers has that
Yeah.
ability, or About Schmidt, or anything that another one of my favorite filmmakers was Hal Ashby. Like,
Mhm.
he could do Being There, which is something that is
Yeah.
so incredibly funny and smart, and also, kind of,
A little
relevant
prophetic.
today. Same thing with a movie like Network, like Sidney Lumet.
Yes.
I mean, very relevant. And Paddy Chayefsky in 1975, he knew where we were going. And I mean, he knew where we were going with healthcare in 1971 with the hospital, and then
Yeah.
knew where we were going as it's kind of like Ned Beatty's character says, we are a nation of corporations.
Yeah.
And I was like, Patty Chayefsky, how the hell did you know that?
Yes.
So
Oh yeah, Network is such an uncomfortable movie to watch today, but it's so good. And you're just sitting there like, this is 50 years old. And it's
when
hitting on
I
all these things that we deal with right now.
when I
So
first saw it, I saw it when I was in high school in the 90s, and I didn't like it. I thought, oh, this is so cynical. There's no way that anything like this could ever happen. And then I watched it again in like maybe 1999, 2000, like right around the time when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on seven
yeah,
nights a week, and the rise of Survivor and the reality TV. And I thought, wow, this movie is like, and then seeing it on stage when Bryan Cranston did it as a play, it was
mhm,
even more like, oh my God, this movie is, it's Patty Chayefsky was on to something. I mean, now,
yeah.
you know, up in heaven, him, Ray Bradbury, Sidney Lumet, Rod Serling, they're all like, told you,
Told you.
told you what was coming.
And it's fascinating in that kind of way. And I know we've kind of segued into this question, but do you have a particular favorite filmmakers that really stand out to you?
God, yeah, Hal Ashby, he's one that I mean, if you look at a lot of the best films of the 1970s, many of them come from him. Harold and Maude, The Landlord, The Last Detail, which I just watched again recently, which I think is one of Jack Nicholson's best
Mm,
performances. A beautiful film, Bound for Glory, about Woody Guthrie, and Shampoo, which also is, kind of, relevant, like just the way with politics and things like
yeah,
that. Of course, Coming Home, which is devastatingly beautiful and moving. And then he, with Being There, and then 9 years later, he was gone. And like the 1980s, like he really struggled. Like he had substance abuse issues, but
yeah,
like as the movies were changing with blockbusters and all of that, filmmakers like him and a lot of filmmakers like
yeah,
Scorsese and Coppola, all of them struggled, and it was a shame. Like I always say that there's that period for American movies from 1967, from when The Graduate and In
yeah,
the Heat of the Night and Bonnie and Clyde came up into the release of Heaven's Gate. That to me is truly the last real, in my opinion, golden age of Hollywood. Like where those kinds of movies, like you couldn't make The Graduate the
mhm,
way that they made The Graduate, or you couldn't make The Godfather. The all of those wonderful casting choices, like those risks that
yeah,
they took. They couldn't make Mean Streets or Bang the Drum Slowly or Nashville, or there's just too much money at stake, and I think they people are less likely to take a risk. I mean, unless it's I mean, you have a small film like a Holdovers, and even
yeah,
with someone like Alexander Payne, they still have to fight for the kind of movie that they want to make. It's why the show The Studio, while
yes,
satirical, it's I think it's really on the money, and of course
yeah.
incredibly funny, but also it's like, oh my God, like Martin Scorsese still has to jump through hoops, and it's like he's been doing this for what, 60 years now. So but
I want Martin Scorsese's Kool-Aid. movie. I see it. That that was I could not believe like that's how that show came out of the gate.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God. And
The
that was such an amazing thing. But like it is such a fascinating thing because there's few times in the history of film that felt like such a stark shift in decades from the 70s into the 80s. And obviously, like you mentioned Scorsese, and he still had Raging Bull in 1980. But it's like his most prolific films are not his films from the 80s, but there's still some great gems with like King of Comedy
oh
and
yeah.
After Hours and
After Hours.
Last Temptation of Christ is such a interesting and challenging film. But it wasn't again until 1990 with Goodfellas where things like shifted back into a different direction. But that's the thing today. It's there is so much money in film, and you're not going to get the big movies, the big studio movies, very often making those kinds of challenging decisions creatively.
Hmm.
It's studios like A24 and like smaller things like IFC and stuff like that, where it's just like, or coming from other places, not the United States, and being able to experience those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But now, thinking about in front of the camera, so who are some of your favorite actors or actresses?
That I've worked with, or well, my idol. I mean, I have
Mhm,
so many fan
mhm,
actors that but the biggest is Jack Lemmon. Jack
mhm,
Lemmon is the reason why I decided to become an actor. I remember I was in high school and I had a family member came up and threw a VHS cassette and it was Days of Wine and Roses. And he said,
mhm,
watch this movie. And that movie was like, it changed my life because I had never seen Jack Lemmon or Lee Remick do something so heartbreaking. Like they were known as, Jack Lemmon himself at the time was known as kind of a light comedic actor, which I know was a phrase that he and Walter Matthau hated. But that
mhm.
movie really changed people's perception of him because it's a very dark take on alcoholism, does not have a happy ending. Jack Warner
Mhm.
wanted them to change the ending, but he and Blake Edwards, they stuck to it. The movie didn't make any money, but we're still talking about it 60 some
Yeah.
years later. But Jack Lemmon's a big influence. Spencer Tracy,
Mhm,
Albert Finney, Jason Robards. I'm a big fan of what I used to do when I was in high school. They used to have this video store where I would go in and I would rent a stack of videos for the weekend.
mhm,
And what I would do is I would pick one actor like I would pick Katharine Hepburn or Vanessa Redgrave or Albert Finney, and I would get a stack of just their movies, and I would watch them in the order that they made them to
mhm.
see the development of the actor. Because I mean, Paul Newman in 1958 is different than Paul Newman in
Yeah.
1982, or Michael Caine in 1963, or is different than Michael Caine in 2010, or Maggie Smith or Laurence Olivier,
Yeah.
and it that was kind of like it was like going to school. Like
Mhm,
I took like courses on like Alec Guinness or Judi Dench or Anthony Hopkins and would watch. And I was always a big fan of character actors like Thomas Mitchell or
mhm.
Jane Darwell or Claude Rains. I mean, God, but Lemon was always the biggest because he was kind of the actor his career trajectory of the kinds of movies that he did. He could do comedy, he could do
Yeah.
drama, he could go on the stage and you do Eugene O'Neill and be successful at it. He was the kind of actor that I aspired to be because that kind of everyman, which the character that people in the audience can connect to. It's like
Yeah.
in the case of After and Hard Truths and Sundays with Dad, hopefully those are characters that people can see a little something in themselves in those
Yeah.
characters, which and if they do, then that's a win in my book.
It's interesting because I think the first time I saw Jack Lemmon in anything was I was in school and they showed us William Friedkin's version of 12 Angry Men.
Ah,
And so, which is funny because I recognize so many of the other people, some of the other actors that were in that cast. And it's interesting because like I'm a huge George C. Scott fan and
oh
like looking
yeah.
back watching him in that. And Jack Lemmon, he's the anchor to that film, just like Henry Fonda was the anchor to the original. But then going back and watching some of Billy Wilder's stuff and just like The Apartment and something like that, and Jack Lemmon just so fantastic, or even watching Glengarry Glen Ross
Yeah.
and just like the seediness that's like underneath the surface. And that's a bit different for compared to a lot of the performances that he's given.
I
It's like
always
that
kind of drew a
desperation.
thread. I always kind of drew a thread that the CC Baxter character in The Apartment kind of morphed into the Harry Stoner character in Save the Tiger, who then became Shelley Levine in Glengarry Glen Ross. And like, I mean, like these are guys that are not likable guys. They're
Mm,
guys that and they really have to dig deep within themselves. Like in Save the Tiger, I mean, they ask his character, "What do you want? Another year?" I mean, and like they have to do things that are not, that are not. We created an entirely new accounting, which is
mm,
what he said to the wonderful Jack Gilford in the film. And he would take risks too, like
mm.
the China Syndrome or Missing.
Yes.
He was not afraid to do projects that were uh, political or
Yeah.
and of course his collaborations with Walter Matthau. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I wish he directed more. He only directed one movie. He only directed Koch, and which is a good movie. But
Mm,
I and I don't think he ever commented really about his experiences directing. But I have a feeling, I suspect he did it, and I think he always
mhm.
just loved being an actor. And
Yeah.
he was always, I mean, up into the end. I mean, with Tuesdays with Maury, like what a way to
Mm,
go out. Like
yeah.
if you're gonna go out on top, and he finally won his Emmy. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up your little like actor classes because I do a show on my channel where I take a deep dive into a director, and every week I watch and talk about one of their films, and I did 80 weeks of John Ford,
oh
the 80 that are available and not lost.
yeah.
Because if there was the 60 other ones, it would have been 140 weeks. And I'm actually going to start Hitchcock in August, which is going to be like 60 weeks. But it's such a
Wow.
fascinating thing to see the evolution of things. And like I've had some fun ones. Like I did Carpenter, which was a lot of fun, except towards the tail end where it's just like, yeah, I'm not surprised you retired. It looks like
Or when he talks about memoirs of an invisible man,
it's just
like
like
yeah.
Chevy Chase. But no, and like I did Spielberg, I did Scorsese, and it's such a fascinating exploration of being able to do that. And you know, you might not be able to go to film school or spend a lot of money with that, but like you can put the time in and learn from film, which is really such a fascinating thing for
Well,
sure.
Tom Cruise said something in an interview today about not enough film, and I agree with him that there are not enough film schools that teach about lighting or
Mm,
and people should look at old films.
yeah,
I mean, the fact that, we're talking today about movies like Network in 1976, or that I was speaking to someone the other night about Sunset Boulevard in 1950. Like,
yep,
you have to there's the history there
mm,
because it's all there. If you just want to see examples of great storytelling, of
mm,
great performance, of lighting, of sound, of
yeah,
all of that. Um, you have to. It's kind of like knowing the history of the country. It's all. It's important to know that, I think.
mhm. And I certainly love taking dives into older films and because film's been around for over 125 years and there's so many amazing films to check out from all eras.
Hmm.
And I feel like you're kind of missing out if you're not watching things. And like I work at a college, so I work with a bunch of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and I love when they're this really old movie that came out in 2002 and I'm like, okay.
I know,
Cool.
Go back to like, Lon Chaney. I mean, that's an
Mhm.
old movie. Or like,
Yeah.
watch John Barrymore, like all of the John Gilbert or Lillian
I
Gish or.
I appreciate you bring up Thomas Mitchell earlier because I definitely became a big fan of his watching all these John Ford movies that I wound up watching. Now, what's a film that you feel like you could literally just watch every day?
The Big Lebowski. I just watched it when I was staying at Tom Angelotti's place when off from the after the first day of shooting of Good Luck to Me. And I when I was in college,
Hmm.
I went to Marietta College. That movie was on a loop for like a year in the house that I was staying in. Like I'd walk in and I would just hear Sam Elliott's voice, and I'm like, "All right, the dude's here." I
Yep.
mean, that's one that it has provided. It has. I have so many memories of that movie, like just
Mm.
watching it with people and drinking cheap beer and
Yeah.
in 1998 and 1999 and it's a really fantastic movie.
Yeah.
And of course, it is reached now legend. Like if Jeff Bridges never made another movie, if that was the only movie that he was known for, he would still be a legend.
Yeah.
And if John Goodman and all of those guys. But and oddly enough, it was not, I think it was the film after Fargo. And I think when it
Yes.
first came out, I don't think audiences quite knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
But that's a definite like remote drop. And of course, easily one of the most quotable
Yes.
movies. Can't quote it around my son, but like, but like it's a fantastic movie.
The Big Lebowski is one of my favorite films, and the Coen brothers are my favorite filmmakers, and they understand character actors and knowing how to make every single character pop and stand out. And that film is just a collection of crazy, weird characters all smashed into this strange homage to Raymond Chandler PI stories and everything. And it's just like, that's what the dude is. He's a
They
brother
really
Seamus.
They really do. If you look at a lot of all of their films, they really do in the same way that John Ford did when he would,
Yeah.
with Ward Bond and
Yes.
Thomas Mitchell and, all of the, Paul Fix, all of the wonderful actors, his troupe. I
Yeah.
mean, like John Polito, wonderful, the late great John Polito,
Yeah.
memorable as Johnny Casper in Miller's Crossing and in The
Mm.
Big Lebowski and in Barton Fink too. I mean, like
Mhm.
he they get these wonderful actors like who just like pop up as like one little scene, but they make it memorable. Ben Gazzara, pops up as like in like one scene as Jackie Treehorn, but
Yeah.
it's memorable. And they wanted him in the movie because they were such Cassavetes fans, Killing of a
Mm.
Chinese Bookie and The Husbands and Opening Night. And so like that's like that's the dream, like to work with people like that who are students, are real students and professors of film.
And they'll never let you know it.
Yes.
Because they don't like talking to, don't like showing their hand to anything, which is so
Oh
fascinating.
yeah.
Now, what's a film that you feel like it connects with you because it relates to another interest of yours?
Sideways. When I saw Sideways, when that I, s- there are movies that you see at a time in your life where it was like oh my God, that's just what I needed.
Hmm.
And I remember I saw the movie when I was on a date, and my date didn't like the movie, so there
Hmm.
wasn't a date number two.
Yeah.
Uh, but I remember, and the thing is, like, the character that of Paul Giamatti. One, I'm a huge Giamatti fan, and
Yeah.
that was like after American Splendor, like finally this guy's gonna get, his due. Because I had seen him on stage in The Iceman Cometh with Kevin Spacey, and I thought he was fantastic. But and in the Howard Stern movie, I thought, wow, who is this guy? Like, but the character of Miles, I connected with him on a personal level because that's every writer, actor, director, painter, sculptor. You've had that punch in the gut, that the scene where the publisher tells him that we just can't do anything with it. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking. And like, and no matter how many times I see it, it's still, I know it's coming now,
Yeah.
that it still gets you, and it stays with you, because that those moments, where we as artists, we audition and we get doors slammed in our faces, and we get movies that, or plays that, things that some go well and some don't
Mm.
go well, and you try to soldier on as best you can, but that little thing of confidence is all, or lack of it, or
Yeah.
you're always battling that. And that's why that movie really, that stays with me.
And that's such a fascinating film too, because like that's the thing about Paul Giamatti. He's had such a great career of being like those great supporting characters in a lot of things. And Sideways was an opportunity for him to really shine. And then he got another one with the holdovers
Oh yeah.
recently. And yeah, there Sideways is such a fascinating little film because there's so many things to dig into with that, and whether it's his character and his journey with his art, where we all have that friend like Thomas Hayden Church, where it's just like, I feel like you're driving me insane. What are we doing here? And there's so many relatable things about that experience of watching that film for sure.
Oh yeah.
But and this is interesting. I don't know if you might have a different answer to this, but who's a movie character you feel like you connect with on a personal level?
A movie character. Wow. Man, that's a tough one. I think it would have to be Miles
Mhm.
in Sideways. I think like that's the one, because you know, uh those moments of you know, when you're an artist, it's ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Where man, sometimes the phone's just not ringing, or oh, some people may not like this movie, or and then coupled with, we're having this conversation today
Yeah.
and talking about, and so, but Miles, it seems that lately it was more, not much, it was more ebb and less flow. And then he meets that a kindred spirit in
Mhm.
beautiful Virginia Madsen's character. I have a quick Virginia Madsen story.
Mhm.
My wife and I, we were when we were living in New York, we had a friend of ours that was appearing in a production of Cabaret at the Studio
Mhm.
54, and we were invited backstage, after the show, and of course, we're not involved in the show in any way, and we just see Virginia Madsen come down the stairs, and she was going backstage to say hi to,
Yeah.
and she's like shaking my hand, congratulating me. She thought I was in the show. I mean, I think she was being very polite, but I was like, Virginia Madsen just congratulated me for being in the show that I wasn't even in. But Virginia Madsen shake my hand. I mean, and so I said, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. It was
Yep.
my pleasure. So
Not the moment to explain yourself.
and
Just accept it
I'm
and let it
sorry
move
I
on.
wasn't in it, but I didn't want Virginia Madsen to be like, who's this guy? So, but I took the compliment. So thank you, Virginia Madsen.
It's a fun little anecdote, which I appreciated for sure. Now, what's a film that you love that you feel like would surprise people?
Let's see. I have there's a movie from 1978. It's a really entertaining film. It's called The Boys from Brazil.
Mm,
And it's a movie, it stars Gregory Peck in one of his rare villain roles. And he really he plays
yeah.
Joseph Mengele.
Mhm.
And it's based on a wonderful, an entertaining book by Ira Levin, who wrote the play Death Trap and Rosemary's Baby. And it's Gregory Peck, it's Laurence Olivier,
Yep.
James Mason, Rosemary Harris, and it's just, it's Franklin Schaffner, who had directed, Patton directed it, and
Mm,
it's just a really entertaining, very, we don't know if this could actually happen, but Gregory
yeah.
Peck plays this Joseph Mengele, who's basically trying to create a new generation of Adolf Hitlers.
Yeah.
And Laurence Olivier plays a character based on Simon Wiesenthal, who tries to stop him, and Steve Guttenberg is in it too, before Police Academy. But it's a really I find I don't know if I would call it a guilty pleasure because it was a very successful movie,
Mhm.
and but I see it all the time. I've probably watched it about 20 times.
It's such a wild premise to
Yeah,
throw out there in a thriller,
yeah.
and especially because like it's just taking like real life events, like something so serious like that, and just being like, but what if cloned Hitlers? And it had such like great actors in it, like
Oh
that
yeah.
attracted them to such a project. It's so funny because I'm a huge fan of the show Archer,
Oh yeah.
the and they had a whole entire storyline that basically ripped off that movie.
No
And
kidding. Oh wow.
yes,
I got to see that.
and because one of the characters may or may not be a Hitler clone, um, the whole time
Oh
through the
my
whole entire
God.
show. And that was such a wild because like that show's wild. It
Yes.
sends up so many like
Oh my
classic
God,
films.
yeah.
Like obviously it started off as like a James Bond spoof, but it goes well beyond that. And there was a whole entire group of episodes that lampoon that idea. And I'm like, this is wild. And it's like being able to channel something like that. But
The thing about the end of that movie when you see 60-year old men fighting on the floor like that, and not knowing full well that Laurence Olivier was not in the greatest of health. So
yeah.
I was like, how they did that? Because Gregory Peck was like, like, all right, I don't want to hurt Lord Laurence Olivier here, I don't want to hurt Gregory Peck, but like, God, so, but no, I enjoy it. Like it was one of like in the 70s, like Lou Grade, who was the producer, he made all of these kind of big, kind of lavish, star-studded movies,
Mhm.
and that was probably one of the more successful ones.
Yeah. Now, my last question for you, Tim, is what do you love most about movies?
That there are things about life that I have learned from watching movies. I've learned about love from,
Mhm.
I've learned about how, how to talk to a lady from watching Cary Grant. I've
Mhm.
learned about comedy from watching Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau and B. Arthur and Bob Newhart, and I've learned about little tips about being a father from watching Kramer versus Kramer. Like every time my son goes to the playground, I think of the scene where Justin Henry falls and Dustin Hoffman is carrying him and running across Park Avenue to the
Mhm.
hotel. Good job, Dustin Hoffman. So like there are things from movies that have been like, key moments in my life, like watching Donald Sutherland in Ordinary People.
Mhm.
That and watching that and Jack Lemmon in Days of Wine and Roses. I knew I wanted to be an actor after seeing Jack Lemmon, but when I saw Donald Sutherland and that last scene that he does in Ordinary People, I said, I'm an actor. Like I want to do that. I want to have, and so, the movies, I owe the movies my life because and the fact that when I went to college I wanted to be a good actor in the theater. I wanted to do
Mhm.
Shakespeare and things like that. Never thought about movies. And moving to New York and doing working with the film NYU Films and School of Visual Arts and New York Film Academy, and then eventually now producing and writing and acting in my own films. It's when collaborating with wonderful people. It's really nice. The journey has been really, really nice, and I'm just getting warmed up.
There you go. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Tim. And also, that is the thing. We can learn so much from film because at the end of the day, it's people telling stories and expressing experiences. Some of them are packaged in, stories in outer space or fantasy worlds and stuff like that, or some of it's just the most mundane human experience that it possibly can be. But there's so many things that we could take away from it. Now, I always like to
Absolutely.
wrap up my show by having my guests ask me a question. So, what would you like to ask the Wasteland reviewer?
What movie, whether it's a movie that is there a movie that you went in with expectations that it was going to be something great, and when you watched it, it turned out to not be at all what you were expecting. And it was not only not, but if you went in with high expectations and it came out to be such a disappointment. Have you ever had that kind of a film experience?
So, I can think of two, and it's interesting, like talking about a director like David O. Russell at this point, because not exactly the best person, and not a whole lot of people seem to like him very much.
Yeah,
And
that
but like
that video of him yelling to Lily Tomlin, I think that's gonna follow him forever, I think.
yes, but like I was a big fan of Silver Linings Playbook. I I remember seeing American Hustle and like really enjoying that movie and finding out a lot of people did not like it at all. And I'm like, interesting. But the when the trailer for what was that film Amsterdam came out
Uh-huh.
and just has this giant star-studded cast, and then I sat down and watched it in the theater. I'm just sitting there like, this doesn't really feel like this is clicking at all.
Yeah.
It's just there's just so many really talented people in this movie, but nothing's like popping or coming together. One that was much more of like a visceral experience for me. So I grew up being a big M. Night Shyamalan fan because I should not have watched Signs when I was 12 years old when I got that DVD in a mail-in DVD service, but I did, and it still terrifies me. But like between The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and Signs, I'm like, I was such a big fan.
Yeah.
And obviously things took a turn, but have also taken another turn. And I remember seeing Split. And not only being really impressed by the film and obviously James McAvoy, but being one of the only people in the theater that audibly reacted when they showed Bruce Willis. And I'm like, this is an Unbreakable sequel. And then Glass happened. And I went to go to the theater and see this movie that I was so hyped for. And
Hmm.
I left it just, I was actually angry for like how disappointed I was by this movie. And I've had some friends who are like, give it another try because the where that movie went was defied all expectations.
Hmm.
And I think in the moment at least, and I can't attest to like if I watch it again and then like expectations are different and I appreciate it more, but in that moment I'm just like, you just spit on all of us because like just where the story went was and what it did with the characters, I'm just like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And he made a movie that he wanted to make and was not the movie that everybody after Split was going in to expect to go see. And I was very frustrated by it. I am interested to check it out again to see if like maybe with a step back, I'm not as frustrated
Hmm.
and knowing where it's gonna go. But that was definitely one of those moments where I left the theater. I'm like, I'm not a happy camper right now.
I remember I went to an afternoon screening. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon of The Lady in the Water. And I'm
Mm,
watching it, and there's maybe about 10, 15 people in the theater. And as the movie's progressing, you just see people getting up and walking out. And and it got down to me and one person, and we're sitting there watching it. And I was actually quite moved by the film because of Paul Giamatti. I think
yep,
he
he was very good
really
at that for
invested.
sure.
But the of course, inevitably I had to ask the person. I said, "Well, what made you stay?" And he said, I, I think this movie is terrible, but I wanted to like it was kind of like watching The Room. I wanted to see how they were able to tie it all together. And but like so I might be the one person that I'm kind of in the middle on Lady in the Water, but it's mostly because of Paul Giamatti and Bryce Dallas Howard. I think they're
Yeah.
both and I love Bob Balaban in that movie too, but
Oh, that certainly is not his worst. Like
yeah.
that, I feel like that was like I think somebody needs to like check you a little bit because like the whole it was very obvious he was turning on the critics who were turning on
Yeah.
him and he was being very vocal in the script about it. But no, The Happening, The Last Airbender, After Earth was boring. It was 90 minutes, and this is a fun story for me to tell. But I kept falling asleep, and my wife kept waking me up. My now wife kept waking me up because she was very drunk on some Long Island iced teas for dinner before it. And she kept shaking me. She's like, "What is this movie?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's boring. Try to sleep." And that was like, I feel like the bottom. And then like The Visit came out, and I'm like, fun little film. And then Split came out. I'm like, he still has something in there. And now it's like my expectations going to one of his films now are like, this could be great or it could be crap. But you know what? It's interesting wondering what it's going to be. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
okay
kind
with
of
that.
it's going to be unlike anything like the one with Dave Bautista in The Cabin.
Yeah, Knock at the
Um,
Cabin.
yeah, was really interesting. Had
Yep.
like I mean, that's the thing is there are people he still gets people who want to work with him and
Yeah.
his movies. No, he makes movies unlike anyone else, and so but there's that fascination. I have a feeling that people are going to look at some of those other movies maybe differently in the next
Mhm.
15, 20 years. So, but we'll see.
It'll be interesting. But Tim, thank you so much for your time and coming on and talking about some of your projects and talking about movies with me.
Thank you, Shane. It was a pleasure to have speaking with you.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.